like me to put up the turnaround questions for Paula to photograph?
Well, let's just wait because you're going to put it up again, and anybody who's here who would like to, if you have a smartphone, just take a picture of the handout that she posts at the time. But I think for now, Diantha, why don't you just give your instructions, and then I'll go ahead and read our discourses quote to start our session.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. I'm just the techie support here for this wonderful group that I feel very blessed, a lot of gratitude that it's happening. And so if you need something, just private chat me. And I think we're all just going to try to mute ourselves, because otherwise you end up popping up with every little shuffle that you make in your room. You know, the mic will pick it up and you'll be the featured main screen star when you may not want to be. So go ahead and put yourselves on mute. And I'm assuming you all know how to mute and unmute yourselves. And so if you ever find yourself muted, it's because I muted you. But that shouldn't be a big deal. And if you want to just speak up, just go right ahead. There's not too many people, so I don't think it's going to be an issue. And if it becomes one, then we'll talk about it from there. I am recording this session because it's going to go up on a YouTube that Robin actually runs. And it's just really useful for people who can't make it and for people who want to catch up, who haven't been making it. And so hopefully that's okay. So that's all. And let me know if you have any questions.
And one more technical point is that if you don't want to be recorded, then just don't identify yourself. Or when we do the inquiry, we all just give our responses. And I think personally, there's only one mind and all of our thoughts are just recycled. So I don't find it's a problem at all. But if you're uncomfortable with that, then don't unmute when we do the inquiry. Okay? All right. So I think we're ready to begin now. And I just have to say, Diantha is much more than a techie. She really helps me, and you know, and obviously you're part of our inquiry circle, and you add beautiful insights, and I'm very grateful. I just have to say that. So today, I'm going to read a quote from Discourses, pages 163 to 165, from, of course, our beloved Baba. The mind rarely functions harmoniously because it is mostly guided and governed by forces in the subconscious. Few persons take the trouble to attain mastery over these hidden forces that direct the course of mental life. The elimination of conflict is possible only through conscious control over the forces in the subconscious. This control can be permanently attained only through the repeated exercise of true valuation in all the cases of conflict presented to the mind. The process of bringing conflict to the surface of consciousness should not degenerate, however, into a process of imagining conflict where there is none. The sure sign of a real hidden conflict is the sense that the whole of one's heart is not in the thought or action that happens to be dominant at the moment. There is a vague feeling of a narrowing down or a radical restriction of life. On such occasions, an attempt should be made to analyze one's mental state through deep introspection. For such analysis brings to light the hidden conflicts concerning the matter. When the conflicts are thus brought to light, it is possible to resolve them through intelligent and firm choices. Modern psychology has done much to reveal the sources of conflict, but it has yet to discover methods of awakening inspiration or supplying the mind with something that makes life worth living. This indeed is the creative task facing the saviors of humanity. So of course, Baba wrote this like 80 years ago, and I do believe there are those now who are giving us modern psychological tools that can inspire us to supply the mind with something that makes life worth living. And I feel that the work is one of those modalities. And I have been amazed to find through my research, when I've studied Baba's words on the mind, how much they are in absolute alignment with the work of Byron Katie. So that's why I'm sharing this specifically with Baba lovers. And also, Baba talked in that quote about through introspection, that's how we find the solutions to these problems that lie below the level of consciousness. And I experienced the work as meditation. And when you can actually get very still and allow your inner wisdom, your intuition to rise up, it will give you the answers for your life consistently. And it's something that we can develop this practice so that it becomes second nature. So does anybody have anything they'd like to share about the quote that I just read from Discourses? Okay, so what I'd like to do now then, if you'd have to unmute yourself if you wanted to share, so I just want to make sure nobody has anything to say. Okay. Last week we talked about sadness quite a bit and how that came up for us during our inquiry in receiving criticism from people. And I was reading in a Sufi book this week. It's called The Return of the Feminine and the World's Soul by Llewellyn Vaughan Lee. And I read something that I felt upgrades sadness to longing. And I felt like I needed to just speak to that because I think that is the way through sadness. I think we are able to recognize that underneath sadness, which sometimes devolves into self-pity and those kind of things, we can actually find that in that sadness is the longing for God. And that is what Baba tells us is the way through. We all have that longing for God. And when we can acknowledge it, I think it really upgrades that sense of sadness. So here's what I read this week that I wanted to share with you. He says, we need to reclaim the sanctity of sadness and the meaning of the heart's tears. This intense inner longing is the central core of every mystical path. As the anonymous author of the 14th century mystical classic, The Cloud of Unknowing, simply states, your whole life must be one of longing. The heart sickness of the lover is a longing to return to the source in which everything is embraced in its wholeness. This suffering is the labor pains that awaken us to this higher consciousness, in which love joins this world with the infinite, and the heart embraces life, not from the divisive perspective of the ego, but from the eternal dimension of the self. From within the heart, the oneness of love becomes life's deepest wonder, for it is the heart that sees the primordial eternity of every creature. If we can create a context of longing, then those whose hearts are burdened with this quest will come to know the true nature of their pain. They will no longer need to repress it, fearing it as a depression or a psychological problem. We need to be able to collectively affirm this inner secret, that the heart suffers because it has not forgotten its true love. Longing is the pain of separation, and at the same time, the affirmation of union. It is the dynamic imprint upon consciousness of the soul's memory of the eternal moment when we are together with God. Each moment of longing reminds us of our real nature And the more potent this pain is, the more this memory is alive within the heart. This is the work. Thus, the work of a mystic is to keep this fire burning within the heart, and through devotion and aspiration to let it burn so strongly that it burns away the veils of separation. Okay. So as I mentioned to some of you who weren't here last week, we started working on accepting the gift of criticism. And Diantha, you could post that sheet right now. And I'm not going to read it again, but we can leave it up while we review what we're going to do today. And you can take a picture of it with your smartphone. And the gist of it is that it can be an incredible tool for self-realization when we receive criticism from others. And I told the story last week about Byron Katie taking the work into prisons and working with some hardcore inmates. And this one inmate just was criticizing her hair. You need a different haircut. You have the wrong glasses. You need to wear makeup. And when she was telling the story, she was like, oh, tell me more. She was so interested to hear what he had to say. And I mean, I can tell you, she didn't take any of his advice because she kind of looks the same as she always has. But, her comment from it was, wow, that guy would make a really good stylist, And so, but she didn't take it personally. And I think that it's something that most of us really have to work with, because criticism can really sting. And yet we find out in the work that if we are criticized by someone, if we can find what it is, what stress it triggers inside of us, we can actually find what we're hiding from ourselves. And that's what we can inquire into. And that's what we're doing this week and last week with the thought, they hurt me with their criticism. And I think last week we went through statement number 1, and that was the statement. And we did all the turnarounds, and we looked for examples where, I hurt me with my criticism. I hurt me with their criticism. They helped me with their criticism. So we're going to continue on this week, going to the Judge-Your-Neighbor Worksheet. What I said last week was that the Judge-Your-Neighbor Worksheet is like the core piece of the work. And what I've found over the years, working with clients and just working on my own, is that when you really thoroughly work with question number 1, so I am upset with him because, he hurt me with his criticism, that's what we're working on. When you do that one really thoroughly, it tends to collapse the rest of the Judge-Your-Neighbor Worksheet. But I also recognize that the work is new to all of you, and I think it's important for you to utilize this tool. You can download it for free from thework.com. And when you get in the habit of noticing what causes your suffering, and you can get it down on paper, you're going to be able to unwind, and you're going to be able to find your part in it, and you're going to be able to just feel more compassion for the whole situation. So this week, we're going to work on the wants. And I was delineating between numbers 2, 3, and 4, the wants, the shoulds, and the needs. So there's the wants. What we're going to do this week is where you can just kind of let your ego go crazy. It's like a tantrum or whining. So right now, in your situation, how do you want them to change? What do you want them to do? So just write down, I want whoever to. And remember to keep short, simple sentences, because you can only question one concept at a time. So Katie's example is, I want Paul to see that he is wrong. I want him to stop lying to me. So find those short, simple sentences. And we'll see how long this takes us. And then if we have time today, we'll go on and work with with statement 3. And so if you're new today, there's 4 questions, and the first 2 is just a yes or a no. And I invite everybody to unmute your microphones because we're doing a group inquiry. So the first 2 questions I ask will just be a yes or a no. And if you don't know, then that could be a no. And then when we get to question 3, Diantha will post the sub-questions which are there to support you in finding how you react when you believe the thought. But just leave the judge your neighbor. Oh, great. Okay. So does anybody have any questions or comments before we begin this inquiry?
No.
Okay. So I don't know what your statement is. And so how am I going to do this? I want him to, let's say I want him to stop criticizing me. Does that work for everyone? Because that's kind of a whine and a tantrum, because just wanting somebody to do it isn't probably going to happen. All right, so that's what we're going to take, because I don't know how else I can, respond to everyone's statements. So I'll say them because it could be a he or a she. So take a few gentle breaths now. This is really important that you just relax. You can close your eyes and just be receptive. This is a meditation, and be receptive to the answers that arise from deep within you. Okay? So is it true that you want them to stop criticizing you?
Yes.
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 Okay.
Maybe not.
Okay. So that might be a no. And you can't do it wrong. There's no wrong answer. So now, if you said yes, then you go to the second question. But if you already said no, then you can just wait and stay in your reflective mode. Can you absolutely know that it's true that you want them to stop criticizing you? And I want you to take a full minute before you respond. This is where you really ponder, can I absolutely know that it's true that I want them to stop criticizing me? And watch how your mind works and see if any images arise. Can I absolutely know that it's true that I want them to stop criticizing me? And there's still no wrong answer. Can you absolutely know that it's true that you want them to stop criticizing you? No.
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 I would say yes.
Yeah, good. The most important thing is to be honest. So does anybody want to share why they said no in this situation?
I'd share. I would say the criticism is sometimes on the money, but it's the tone that hurts.
Okay. I know for me, I said no the second time because after doing the work for 10 years, I actually do know that it's a gift, that anything that triggers me is just, it's like my breadcrumbs on my homeward journey. Everything that triggers me is showing me where my work is. And sometimes it's just too much. And so then I would say, yes, I don't want them to, I can't absolutely know that it's true. And you just have to be honest. But it does get clearer over time when we're ready to actually look within and see where could that be true. Or with someone like Katie in that prison example, she just thought it was fascinating, and I've seen her over and over, tell me more, tell me more. And it's like this curiosity that's very childlike, but she doesn't take it all personally. So that's another way that we can look at it. And we might find something helpful, like I think the other day my son criticized me. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I could immediately see that it was true. And so in that sense, it was a gift. And when I let it go, he certainly doesn't hold on to it. So it just becomes a new way to live. So now we're going to go on to question 3. And Diantha is going to post the sub-questions, because in question 3, how do you react? What happens when you believe the thought that they hurt me with their criticism? Usually what happens in the beginning is that we go into these stories, but we're not really answering the question how we react. Now that's the turnarounds. We want to go to the sub-questions for number 3.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. And so I want you to contemplate, how do I react when I'm believing the thought that they hurt me with their criticism? So you can look at this, and this can help you. And then it becomes more internalized over time. And then, because really what happens in the work is the whole process becomes internal when you've done it enough. And so you're going to be able to notice what emotions do you feel when you're believing that they hurt you with their criticism? And just speak it out. This is our group inquiry.
Anger.
Okay.
Sadness.
Yeah.
Fear.
Anger and sadness.
Yes. It could be all those things: fear, anger, sadness, revenge, resentment. We want to retaliate. So now what I'd like you to do, whatever emotion you found, whether it's anger, sadness, fear, I want you to locate in your body where you feel that. This is really important.
Solar plexus.
And Damien, can you describe the sensation in your solar plexus? This is for all of us to get very still and notice, what does it feel like? So if you don't mind sharing, Damien, what do you notice when you go into your solar plexus?
It's like a tightness there.
Yeah,
It's
a tightness.
A fluttering tightness. Makes me want to protect it.
Yes, yes. And really, as a culture, we've been taught to repress and suppress these uncomfortable feelings. But what I found over and over again in the work is that if we can just sit with them for 60 to 90 seconds, something will shift. And over time, these layers of uncomfortable sensations diminish. And our body just becomes like a sounding board. It's like an instrument that we can actually feel these uncomfortable feelings, and they give us information, and they don't last. And so they're like parts of wisdom that we can actually re-access and own, and they support us in finding our way into our heart of hearts. So what I'm going to ask you to do right now is you have to, Baba talks a lot about learning to control our mind. And this exercise is a way to practice controlling your mind. I have found that it's something that we develop. We have to keep working at it. So what I'm asking you to do is to take this laser focus of your thinking and go into that uncomfortable sensation, wherever it is. For Damien, it's the solar plexus, it's tight, and it has a fluttery feeling. Whatever it is for you. And this takes courage. And, that's why Katie says it's not called the work for nothing. It is hard work. And I really respect you for being here and being willing to give it a chance. So I'm going to ask you now to find that uncomfortable feeling and just penetrate it with your mind as the witness. You are the objective observer, and you have to not identify with your body, your emotions, or your thoughts, because you are not any of those. You are your soul and your pure spirit. So we're going to do this right now, and then I'm ask you to report to me anything you noticed. Would anyone like to share what they noticed?
I noticed, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I noticed like a really deep grief. And then I realized it was like a loss of myself.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. So to notice that level of grief, which is a very deep emotion, it's really important then to stay with that grief. And you can go back to that in any time, because of course in this inquiry circle that we're in, it's not the place to be able to just stay in it for very long. But when you can, what happens in my experience is that when we honor the grief, we allow ourselves to feel it, then it can be moved through. Once it's honored, it's able to just resolve itself. And yeah, I also noticed in my solar plexus, there was a tension, and I noticed when I focused on it, I just noticed that it relaxed quite a bit. And I didn't particularly find anything else, but it's often true that when you just stay with that uncomfortable feeling for 60 to 90 seconds, it will diminish. Is there anybody else who would like to share their experience?
Excuse me, I felt the vulnerability and loneliness kind of childhood.
Oh, wow. So what I would suggest on that one is
Yeah.
write a little note, because if you can find an image from your childhood when you had that feeling, that would be a
Yes.
separate inquiry that you could take and put down on a Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. And this is most often the case, is we find situations from our early childhood that have never been resolved. And one of the ways we can do that is to honor that particular image or memory that arises and go into that, do the work on it. And if you're familiar with the concept of inner child work,
Yeah.
I have found it most effective to take a few moments,
Mhm.
and whether you do it verbally or non-verbally, tell your inner child that even though your parents couldn't give you what you needed, you're there as the adult now, 24/7. And I've seen this work over and over again with clients, where the fragmented parts of the soul from childhood get reintegrated as that child part of ourself learns to trust that we're the adult, we're the parent they've been waiting for. And when all that integrates, then there will be an end to those childhood memories that arise through your self-inquiry. But it's really important to honor those memories and images that arise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else who would like to share before we go on?
I definitely went back into my young child self
Yeah.
and the sensitivity, the acute sensitivity. I wasn't seeing a particular scene, but just tuning into that, experience when I was young.
And was it a positive or a negative sensitivity? Was it
Probably
painful?
too extreme, too extreme.
Yeah.
Overly.
Well, and I think that's true for all of us, because as children, we still do have so much sensitivity before our, I don't know, karma descends or whatever. But it's just, I keep a picture of myself from when I was young. I just keep it on my dresser, because it's so important to honor our child self, because I think it's when we were so close to our soul, and that's part of our true nature. And when we can bring that innocence into our adult life, it's pretty profound to keep that innocence and bring it into our where we are now. And I have found one sure way to do that is to heal those parts of ourself that are still wounded from our childhood experiences, and then to just go in. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen it work, where once we take responsibility to parent that part of ourself, it just isn't a problem anymore. Okay, so now we can put the sub-question list back up, Diantha, and we're going to look at some of the other sub-questions on how do you react when you're believing the thought that they hurt me with their criticism. So there we are. Yeah, so see, and then see the next one I have written down is where and at what age did that thought first occur to you? So now just notice if you have an early memory, and if you don't, it's fine, but sometimes an image or a memory will just arise when you first had that thought that someone hurt you with their criticism. And this can be very important in healing the wound of being so vulnerable and sensitive as a child and never healing from it. So just notice and take note if something arises for you with that. And then you can do that inner child work that I just described to you. And this is so much about absolutely encircling yourself with love. most of us are pretty good at loving other people and helping and serving. And I have really found for myself in the work that if I leave myself out of that circle of love, I'm just suffering. And I think that when we love ourselves almost in an impersonal way, you know, just recognizing that we're a dropped soul, just like everyone else, and that we have so much more in common than not. And why wouldn't I love myself? And then the next sub-question I have here for you to consider is just if any images arise when you're believing that thought. And most often that does come from something that's not resolved in childhood, but it could be as well something from your adult life. And when an image arises, take a note of it so that you can actually do the work on that particular situation. Because the situation we're working on now is different. And so we just take notes, and then that becomes a separate inquiry. So now I want you to notice, whose business are you in when you're believing the thought, they hurt me with their criticism? Or no, we're believing the thought that I want them to stop criticizing me. So whose business are you in? I want them to stop criticizing me.
Their business.
Yeah, so remember, if you were here, and if you weren't, all the sessions are available on Robin Vogel's YouTube channel. We did one of our first sessions on the 3 kinds of business, which is a foundational premise of the work. Every time we go out of our own business, we suffer. And this is a really challenging shift that we have to make. But when we notice whose business am I in, we're always noticing that, oh, we're in their business. So it's just good to notice, and it becomes second nature after a while. And of course, when we write our judgments down, we're always judging another person. So we're always in their business. So if you want to take a screenshot of the 3 kinds of business, you could do that right now. We'll just take a moment. There's my, what?
Could they make it a little bigger?
There. Even just take that shot, because the bottom part is just a kind of a way to get clear. My height is God's business. Attending a concert is my business. What my brother ate is their business. So it's pretty straightforward.
Can you just scroll down a little bit, because I can't see the whole thing now. Okay.
When you understand the 3 kinds of business enough to stay in your own business, it frees you to see your own path with much more clarity. Eventually, you may come to realize that you don't have any business either. You may begin to give yourself the same courtesy that you give us. I have to say, when I started doing the work, I was in all my family's business. And when I got out of it, everything changed. It's like nobody else has to change. It's like magic, just stay. And then I found out what my business was. And right now, you know, my business, well, Baba tells us our business is to love him. That's what Baba says. It's a quote. Your business is to love me. So we know what our business is. And also, I noticed that I feel really drawn to sharing this self-inquiry work of Byron Katie, infusing it with all of Baba's words. So for now, that's my business, but I can hardly wait to have no business at all, because that sounds like pure enlightenment. I don't know. I think that would be really cool. But until that time, you know, it's really, really good to find what you love, to find your own business, and just notice what happens when you get out of other people's business. It's pretty radical.
I love The paragraph 2, notice when you feel loneliness or separation, are you mentally out of your business? If you are not sure, stop and ask yourself mentally, whose business am I in? Notice when you give uninvited advice, either out loud or silently, whose business are you in? No, where's the part about I lonely myself? It's
Well, I don't know. I see no one else causes my loneliness. Oh, I lonely me. There, you've got your cursor. You had, it's,
Yeah, I've been thinking about
Less-
that one a lot.
Yeah.
Like when you're thinking about someone else and what they're doing and what they're thinking and what they're doing to you, and like you're way over
Yes.
there, then you're separating from yourself and you're not like taking
yes.
care of yourself,
And-
and it feels lonely.
And that's true when it's stressful. Now, sometimes you can think of someone and it's happy. And so it's all a dream. And Baba's told us that this life is a dream that we're waking up from. And, you know, Katie says, if you're enjoying the dream, great. And if you're having a nightmare, then question your thinking and wake up. And so the reason I love to share the work is because it really works. And, you know, Katie always says, don't believe me, just try it for yourself. And so, you know, I invite you to do that same thing. And it's not called the work for nothing. It really is learning to control the mind. And I really hadn't realized how much Baba talked about learning to control our mind until I started really researching all the things he said on mind. So it's quite amazing, because I think I had a negative concept about mind control. But now what I've learned in the work is that the mind is like wild horses. You know, you have to harness those thoughts. You have to focus your mind, and it's a real discipline, and it gets easier. It gets easier. And sometimes, you know, we just want to be lazy and let our thoughts wander. And then when we suffer enough, we can bring it back and really start questioning our thoughts and noticing what's causing our suffering. So does anybody have anything? Yeah.
And who would you say, I mean, there's some simple questions on there like my height. Would you say that's my business or God's business?
What would you say? I mean, who gave you your height?
But what came to me first was God's business, but then again, it probably came karmically from other lifetimes, whatever. But also God wants me to be the height I am to help me along this lifetime.
Yeah, well, and we did talk about it. We did talk about that particular one, I think, and the body. So because there's my height, which I think we pretty much agreed it was God's business. And then we had a conversation about my body. And I would still say that's God's business, but I would also say it's my business. It's God's business in that, yeah, the body that I got was created for my soul based on my sanskaras. But it still feels like it's God's business. But for instance, we talked about how I treat my body, how I feed it. You know, Katie always talks about feeding and watering the body, you know, kind of like it's a horse, because it's so impersonal in a way. And so in a sense, I think our body can be our business in the sense of how we take care of it.
That makes definitely how we take care of it, I would say. Very much my business.
Yeah. But what we come into with this life with is God's business, because at that point, we really don't have control over it. But we do have control over how we take care of it, which will affect our future, you know, the next body we get, right? Do any other of those bring up a question for you, Damien? Rush hour traffic, whose business is that?
Well, I would say their business. I would say what popped in my head was their business.
Yeah, I used to think it was their business, like the people who, you know, build the controls the traffic lights, the streets. And on one level, I think it could be their business. But generally, people in the work call that God's business.
Mm-hmm. Because it's just happening.
Yeah, like the weather is God's business. I
Yeah,
mean, people
that
can
makes
say
sense.
that other people's business too, but in
But-
reality, God's kind of running the show.
Yeah, my mother's depression is really first her depression, her business.
Yeah, we would say that's her business
Mhm.
because it's how she's going to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's good to notice the most important thing is to recognize how often we go into other people's business. So Katie says your gurus are the people you live with. They show you everything you don't want to see about yourself. And I'm telling you, every day I go into my husband's business and I mean, I really work at this. And it's well-meaning, blah, blah, blah. But when I stay out of his business, life is much better. But I'm sharing, I really like to share my own journey with you because I'm in it and I can tell you it's gotten way better than it used to be. But like with my husband, it's like I still want to control his diet. But when I really look at it, if I could just figure out my diet, that would keep me busy. It's not and you just have to let people go and do what they do. And it's, I have to say, I love my husband very much, and it's still really hard for me to not try to, give him advice, but it is the cause of suffering. So, I'll let you know when I've mastered that. So let's go back to the sub-questions for question 3. And we're working on, I want them to stop criticizing me. And how do you react? This is question 3. How do you react? What happens when you believe the thought that you want them to stop criticizing you? So now we're going to go on to, how do you treat that person when you're believing the thought that you want them to stop criticizing you? And even if only in your mind, how do you treat them? And just, share. You can unmute if you feel like sharing. When you notice.
I had a situation where I was teaching class and I knew this particular man had taught the same class, and I asked him for any suggestions, and his response was, why are you teaching a class if you don't know any of the exercises, and Google it? And so,
Ouch.
And so I asked him, did that question annoy you? Hasn't answered. So,
He hasn't answered. Yeah. It's so interesting because honestly, I can just hear Katie responding to that. She's really trained me. She would probably say something like, well, I just thought you might have a few insights that you could share with me from your experience.
Well, that was my first email to him.
Yeah.
I tried to explain myself, but doesn't do it.
No, it
because
generally,
I put it on me, like, oh, it's all my fault for bothering you.
Yeah, and so we learn not to go there. We learn to just, in that situation, when it was an email.
Yeah.
So you were I know you're an actress, right? So you were putting a lot of drama and tone into it, but really, you could either just ignore it or just say, I'll Google it. You know what I mean? You'll know what to do, but just notice the possibility of being able to get that email, notice his energy when he wrote it, and just being neutral. Could you imagine being neutral?
But then I feel like, you know, he's slapping me around.
Nobody can slap you around. You do that to yourself. This is the lesson. This is why we have to conquer ourself. This is why conquering our own anger is more important than conquering the world, because we react. I imagine you might have felt some anger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way to conquer anger is to feel it. Baba says, I don't want you to be a stone. I want you to feel the anger. I just don't want you to express it. And honestly, Tina, if you can do that, you are such a champion. I'm telling you, I have worked so hard at this, and it's such freedom to feel anger and not react. And it actually builds some core strength in us as we learn to master this. And I'm telling you, Baba has written about this over and over, but we really have to practice it. It's the only way it changes. And as I said in other weeks, you come to the place where you just feel compassion, because obviously that person who sent you that email is suffering. He's not a happy camper. Anybody who responds in a kind of negative way, you just feel compassion for them. And you don't have to respond to anything.
I asked somebody else, and he was very helpful, but he's a Baba lover, but not mean anything.
Right. Well,
but a lot of people nowadays, when you ask them a question, they'll say, why are you bothering me? Google it.
well, did you Google it?
I did.
And was it helpful?
Yeah.
Well, yay. So that was accepting the gift of criticism. Go Google it. You know, you Googled it and you found your answers. So just take out the anger and like, what could be wrong?
Yeah.
His emotions are his business. Your emotions are your business. And you know, it's like Katie says, do you want to be right or do you want to be free? Do you want peace or do you want drama? I used to always want drama. And I finally got to the place in my life where I wanted peace. And oh my goodness, I'm really happy. I mean, I had to get older before I wanted peace, before drama, but it's a much nicer way to live. Okay, so we were on the sub-question, how do you treat them when you're believing the thought that you want them to stop criticizing you? So Tina noticed that she reacted, you know, you reacted defensively, wouldn't you say,
Yeah.
Tina?
Yeah.
So how did you treat him?
I felt like I'd done something wrong in his eyes. Like I don't know. So I was
that's how you treat yourself. You treated yourself like you did something wrong. So therefore you treated him like he's the one who knows, right?
yeah, I tried to explain myself.
Yeah, so good to notice. So when you were believing the thought that you wanted him to stop criticizing you, you treated him like he knew better than you did. Does anybody else notice how you treat that person when you're believing that you want them to stop criticizing you?
Yeah.
How do you treat them?
I gave him a lot of power. Yes.
You gave him your power. That means you lost it. And that's what happens when we have anger. We actually just spew our power out everywhere. Remember how Baba said in America, he was coming, there was so much energy here, but it was misdirected. It's the same thing with anger. It's misdirected energy. It's raw energy. And when we can harness that anger and that resentment and that whatever negative thing it is into something positive and constructive, it's so liberating. And then all that's left is compassion. You just see how people suffer. It doesn't mean you have to tell them what you see, because you don't. It's not your business unless they ask you. But your business is to deal with your own anger. So does anybody else notice how you treat them when you're believing the thought that you want them to stop criticizing you? I mean, I think it's pretty universal that we give power to those people if we're believing. If we didn't believe their criticism, we probably wouldn't get so upset.
Well, I react by distancing myself. That's one way.
Okay. Yeah.
I go lick my wounds away from them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that also distancing ourselves could be a healthy boundary too. So if you're licking your wounds, then you need to really question what you're thinking and believing, that maybe there's something in the criticism that we could look at. But there's nothing wrong when somebody criticizes you to distance yourself. You know, you can say thank you and you don't have to hang out with them.
Well, I wait and come back after I've reflected if it's appropriate to
and that sounds really healthy
response. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that's a healthy way to deal with criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else want to share before we go on? Maybe on how do I treat myself when I'm believing the thought that I want them to stop criticizing me? How am I treating myself? I'm definitely noticing that if I'm believing that I want them to stop criticizing me.
I had a situation where I was on one of these Zoom conference calls, and I felt like I had shared, but not personally. Well, I responded very open-heartedly to someone, but then can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Then right at the end, one of the people said, like, well, I feel like we haven't heard from Damien that much. And I felt hurt because I felt I had maybe not shared exactly what was going on in my life, but I had shared from my heart to someone else on the call. And,
okay.
And my first reaction was to say, no, I did share, but in a way I felt almost controlled by them, and I went and then shared something more directly personal, but felt a little bad afterwards, angry at them.
Yeah, yeah.
They had made me share when I didn't feel like it. So this is extremely helpful for me to be looking at this and looking at it as a gift in a way to anyway, I felt like I did share more, but I felt like I was forced into it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because when I first heard what you said, it's like I always hear Katie, because she has a certain way of talking, and I would have imagined her saying, "Oh, I thought I shared a lot." Was there anything in particular that you wanted to hear more about?
Yeah, that would have been probably the most honest, because that was definitely what I thought at the time.
Yeah. And so I think for most of us, it's just learning to really have that childlike quality, and which isn't defended, and just say, because I saw it as a compliment when you described it, like, wow, they wanted to hear more from you. That's really cool. And yet you took it in a different way.
Oh yeah, no, it felt, anyway, that's what it felt to me. A different criticism that I hadn't shared more in that.
But do you actually think it was a criticism, or was it somebody just wanting to hear more from you?
Can
you know?
No, it's hard to know.
Yeah, because I took it completely differently when you described it.
Well, I
I
think,
thought it was a real compliment.
oh no, well, Anne, you're completely wrong on that. So, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I know you are.
Making fun of myself.
Yeah. Well, and this just highlights the whole, awareness that we can't really know for
Yeah,
sure
that's
what other people
extremely helpful. It's
are
hard.
saying.
It's hard to be inside of their head.
Right. And we don't want to be inside of their head. And we can just notice if something triggers us to just go inside and notice, what am I thinking and believing right now that's causing my suffering? And I think what Katie represents to me is somebody who's completely undefended. I mean, she went through this experience once where she was going for a walk outside in the dark, and a man came up and put a gun right in her, front. And she's like so unique that she started thinking, oh, this is really interesting. And if he shoots me, he might really feel bad. She was more concerned about how he would feel. He was holding her up, but I mean, it's like she's so, there's such a transcendence that it's like nothing triggers her. I mean, that's an extreme example. I haven't thought of that one for years, but it did happen to her. So I only bring that up so that you can see the possibilities, that we can get to the point where nothing triggers us, not even a gun trigger, And anyway, so let's continue on with our sub questions after how do they treat me. Let's see what's up there next. So this is, now when you're doing the work, you just tune in to the sub questions that feel right for you, but I want you to have a feeling for all of them. And so the next one I have written down is, what addictions/obsessions manifest when you're believing that thought? I want them to stop criticizing me. Sometimes it's just good to notice, because most of us have particular addictions or obsessions that manifest when we're in a stressful situation. And you don't need to say them out loud unless you want to, but I definitely noticed that I would eat when I was stressed out, even when I wasn't hungry, it's something I still do. And also believing there's something wrong with me, like turning it on to myself, obsessing about my own unwholeness. So you can just notice for yourself, because everybody probably has their go-to addictions, obsessions. So I'm going to move on. What are you unable to do? What are you unable to do when you're believing the thought that you want them to stop criticizing you? So just shout it out if you notice. What are you unable to do when you're believing that thought?
I get paralyzed.
Yeah. So just take a moment and be with that paralysis as a scientific observer, an objective observer, and just be with it. Was that Paula who said that?
Yeah,
Okay, so Paula, do you want to do this experiment?
maybe.
Well, this would be the experiment, is to just stay with the paralyzed feeling, just like we did, earlier, and notice where do you feel paralyzed? Can you find it in your body?
Right, well, right now it's in my chest.
Okay, and so would you like to just take a minute and see what it turns into if you put your concentration on, without trying to change it, but just honor the paralysis and then see if an image arises or a memory, or if it just diminishes, something will happen.
Well, to tell the truth, this has brought up so much stuff. And I was already working with some stuff, so it got kind of jumbled up.
Okay. That's okay. So I always like to remind myself and everyone else to just take one baby step at a time. And if it feels like you already have a lot going on, then, you know, there's time for everything. There's no hurry. But when it feels right for you, you know, and I'm speaking to all of us, we can take those uncomfortable sensations like paralysis and just witness it, because it does have information for us.
I think, you know, what I got used to in my life was there was a lot, and trying to, I think for me, it's like trying to get to where I don't dissociate.
Yes.
Where I don't run away from it. It's like, oh, there it is. I have to run. This is not safe.
Yes.
Kind of thing. And so what this does is, like, part of what I hear you saying is, okay, just sit with it, you know? You don't have to run away. You can just, you know,
Yeah.
see what happens, or just let it be.
Well, and you know, in the animal kingdom, it's fight, flight, or freeze. I mean, freezing is also something that prey animals do to stay safe. And so I just like to honor what's happening. And my sense is that if you just allow yourself to feel that paralysis, then it will shift. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Peter Levine's work. I think it's called Taming the Tiger, but it's Peter Levine, and he did profound work helping people with this very thing of releasing those blocked physical sensations that we tend to store in our body.
Mm-hmm.
But he also describes there's a whole scientific process that happens with deer when they freeze, or antelope, like even if they're going to get killed by the predator, they've actually left their body. There's some kind of great endorphins that get released so that they don't even go through the suffering. I just thought that was the coolest thing.
Huh.
So
well, yeah, when I was young, I felt like I lived outside my body. I actually felt that.
Yeah, I know. I understand dissociation, and I think we did those things to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And what we can do as adults is we can reintegrate and find ways to experience our wholeness in a very gentle and slow, loving way. But there's no pressure.
Right.
Because those ways of dealing did serve us. They did serve us, and we can honor that.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
You know, and you know, it's also really important to recognize that our parents and caregivers did the best they knew how.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found over and over again in working with clients that once we can truly forgive our parents, we let them off the hook, and then we're able to parent ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because on some level, we still keep waiting for that parent figure to come and make it right. And of course, that's never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But they were, you know, it's like Baba says, we've had countless parents, countless spouses, countless children. I mean, we've been doing this for a very long time. And, you know, it just gives perspective. And I've said before, I I felt that Baba gave me the work as a bridge to him, because I did not know how to detach and still love unconditionally. And the work has been like stepping stones where I've become so much more detached. And you know, there's a certain loss in that, but I can tell you that the world that awaits us as we become truly detached is really where our soul wants to be. And it's really about letting go of all these attachments we've had for lifetime after lifetime. And we just have to honor the journey and recognize that, you know, we have been in this evolutionary stage for a long time, and that we're longing to return home. And we can just have compassion for ourselves and everyone.
Anne,
So
can I say something?
yes, please.
I've been pretty quiet, and you've taught me some very important things, including to really, really listen. So I don't talk very much, but I will tell you, the teachings that you're sharing are so very important. I know to everybody, I'm speaking for myself at the moment. These teachings are extraordinary. When you speak about being detached, I look at it much more as just being absolutely okay when people are inaccurate or ignorant. When you say mind your own business, I notice in my own mind, a lot of what trips my own peace of mind and being in a relaxed state, I'm minding other people's business. I'm making a criticism, I don't like what they're doing, or I'm objecting to say some immoral behavior that I've witnessed.
Yeah.
I have no control over them. And the more I just watch it as a movie and stay only in my business. My business is to be, I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking, I don't know very much about any of this, but this enlightenment, the more I can be in the light, meaning the more I can be in the natural lovingness that's within me, that's Baba's life is all about. It's what our lives are all about. To be in the light, to me, means what you're going, the teachings that you're sharing at Byron Katie. I'm just sitting here realizing that I won't say anything more than I'm listening so receptively, because what the teachings are so absolutely able for me to create the 3 S's: sanity, sanctity, and stability. It's such a stable way of being, rather than getting being hooked on a feeling, that song, hooked on all of those most of these emotions that carry me away, they're not my business. Some have to be dealt with in a very conscious way and in a very direct way, but so much of what I hear your teachings that you're sharing are just take care of what really pertains to your life. And anything that's said that has nothing to do with the truth of who you are, your ego gets a little bit in the way, ego, edging God out. If they're not aware of what they're saying, or if they are and they don't really mean what they're saying, just wish them the best, send them love, but don't get caught in, oh, how could you say that about me? So the person said it. You just be with the love and the light that you truly are. Be in the light. So I know that was a lot of words, but I really appreciate what everybody else is saying. For me, it's most important for me just to listen and do what I can.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm really glad you brought up listening, because that's a receptive quality. And do you remember when we did the session on the coronavirus, and I saw that it was an opportunity for the whole world to bring the feminine into more balance, because we're forced to stay home and nurture and slow down. And the work really teaches us to listen. So listening, again, is that receptive feminine ability. And when we develop it, then even when somebody criticizes us, we're actually able to hear at a deeper level their own suffering, and maybe there's something in their criticism that is going to be of benefit to us on our awakening. And so it just becomes more impersonal. But I do feel that this is a very receptive modality. It really is about going inside, slowing it down, and sitting with what's going on internally. And ultimately, I feel like it brings our inner masculine and feminine into more balance, which is, of course, leads to the mystical marriage within our hearts. And, you know, Baba speaks to all of this, you know, in his own way. So we're going to ask the last sub-question now. What do you fail to see when you're believing the thought that you want them to stop criticizing you? Just notice, what am I failing to see in that moment when I'm believing the thought that I want them to stop criticizing me? And if you'd like to share anything, just speak up.
Well, I think I'm not seeing them. I'm not seeing that person.
Okay, thank you.
Well, most of the time it's really not about us. You know, and it's like if I want them to stop, I'm basically saying don't be who you are. And I don't really want to do that to somebody else either. You know, so it's my job to work with myself to not internalize things that trigger me.
Yes. And I just like to add, Paula, at the same time, it doesn't mean we have to become doormats. If somebody's really negative, you know, we talked about boundaries and learning to give the honest no in one of our sessions. And that's really important too.
Sorry to interrupt. Is the belief they are hurting me with their criticism, or is it I want them to stop criticizing?
Well, last week we did the whole inquiry on statement number 1.
Oh.
No, this is good that you bring it up because this is the umbrella statement. They hurt me with their criticism. That was number 1 on the Judge-Your-Neighbor Worksheet. So this week we were going to work on number 2, which is what we want. So right now I want them to stop criticizing me. So that's what we're doing. I didn't realize how late it was. And so I'm going to try and do turnarounds, question 4 and turnarounds before we close. And then I think my feeling is that we should just stay with this and get through the whole worksheet, even if it takes 6 weeks, because the nuances of each statement in the Judge-Your-Neighbor Worksheet are pretty profound. And I encourage all of you, if you have access to a printer, to just download for free the Judge-Your-Neighbor Worksheet off of thework.com, and, you know, maybe download a few, because then you can just feel them in as we're working. It's not necessary, but it would be helpful if it's not too much trouble for you. So that answered your question, Diantha. So did anybody notice what they failed to see? This is the last sub-question for how you react. What do you fail to see when you're believing the thought that I want them to stop criticizing me?
Came to me in life here was that I don't have to fix them and I don't have to fix me, which is a paradigm that I notice within myself, that, you know, I look to fix things, and it's like, well, I don't have to. And that,
yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Did everybody hear that?
No, I couldn't hear.
Okay. So Leica, tell me if I'm wrong, but it was very faint, but I think you said, I fail to see that I don't need them to fix.
I don't have to fix them, and I don't have to fix me. Can you hear me a little better? Yeah.
Could you all hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
Good. And thank you. That's really valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the last question for, who would you be without the thought that you want them to stop criticizing you? And I like to ask what you fail to see, because that segues so easily into question 4. So without the thought, Leica notices she doesn't need to fix them or herself. So who would you be, just notice, without the thought that you want them to stop criticizing you? And just speak out if you have anything you'd like to share.
I think I'd be a master.
I love that. I can just see it, Tina. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Without the thought, it's like we're not trying to be Shylock, and exact our pound of flesh from everybody, right? The Merchant of Venice. I mean, I just see how the ego's always wanting to get its share. And we just let that go and decide to move in a different level of consciousness. So we're going to quickly do some turnarounds. So Diantha, why don't you post the turnarounds, even though it won't be exactly, maybe I'll make one for next week that will be for, since now I know what we're going to do. So this was last week's turnarounds, but we're going to turn around. I want them to stop criticizing me. So look at the turnaround to yourself. I want me to stop criticizing me. Can you find an example? We always want to find 3 authentic examples where that could be as true or truer than the original statement. So find an example of, I want me to stop criticizing me. And I know you can all find it. Does anybody have something they'd like to share? Tina?
Well, it's the thought I did something wrong. I feel.
Yes, exactly. So the next time that happens, you just become the witness of it. Oh, there I am thinking I did something wrong. And just, you get really neutral about it, Because remember, no thought is true. The most important thing the work gives us is to learn to disidentify from thought. Happy thoughts aren't true, sad thoughts aren't true. We have to go beyond thought. In order to live in the realm of Baba, in order to live in our true nature, we have to go beyond thinking. And I have found one way to still the mind is to question stressful thoughts, because they become less and less if you really work at it. There's less and less stressful thoughts that arise. So let's go to the turnaround to the other. So you can see the examples from last week. So in this situation, it would be, I hurt them. No, I want me to stop criticizing them. That would be one turnaround to the other. I want me to stop criticizing. So that would be the turnaround to the other here. I want me to stop criticizing them. So even if only in your mind, can you find where you're criticizing the person who criticized you? Can everybody find it? So the prescription for happiness is to live our turnaround. So I want me to stop criticizing them. And that will keep us busy like full time. Every time you catch your mind criticizing yourself and someone else, you just want to catch it and question it. So turn around to the opposite. I want them to keep criticizing me. So we said stop. I want them to stop criticizing me. We won't say start because they've already done it. I want them to keep criticizing me. Now, why would we do that? We could also say, I don't want them to stop criticizing me. But why on earth would we do that? Does anybody want to share?
It's a way to have attention.
What?
A way to have attention.
Well, I haven't thought of that one. Well, yeah, I guess if you like that kind of attention. For me, and in the work, we want them to keep criticizing us to show us if we still have any work left to do. They could keep criticizing us, but if we don't get triggered, nothing sticks to us. Okay? I want them to keep criticizing me just so I can make sure that there's nothing left for me to work on in that situation. Now, if we want them to keep criticizing us to get attention, then I would probably question what kind of attention I want. Does anybody have any comments on the turnaround to the opposite? I want them to keep criticizing me. Okay, but I think we've made it clear that there is a gift in accepting the gift of criticism, because it's going to show us something in ourselves that we can look at and take stock of, and that actually the power is within ourself, and nobody can really hurt us. We only do that to ourselves. So I have a closing quote that this is about wants. We worked on wants today, what we want in order to be happy, or what we want. It's not in order to be happy. We do the needs to be happy. But, Baba tells us when we stop wanting, that's how we become desireless, and that's how we become free. So this is a quote from Baba, from the Mayor Baba Journal, page 125 and 126. So the question was asked, what is true spirituality? Spirituality truly means the life of the spirit. It is to be lived and experienced. It makes you firm like a rock, and neither worldly sorrows nor pleasures upset you. You attain to the state where desires end and you want nothing. When you do not want anything, you have everything. Look at this must, Chadi Baba. He is so innocent, always so happy and so loving, for the simple reason that he wants nothing. And strange as it may seem, he has everything: happiness, eternal peace of mind, and contentment. The state of desirelessness, or of wanting nothing, is a faculty latent in everyone. It is within you, and you must find it out. I have found it and experienced it. I know that everyone has this faculty, but being latent, it has to be found and experienced. The difference between you and me is that although this faculty in me is also present within you, I have actually experienced and felt it, while you have yet to experience it and feel it. I see myself in you all as palpably as you see all these material things with your eyes. It is a fact for me. With your eyes, you see everything external. At the back of this external aspect, there is not mere hollowness or spacelessness, but also pure nothingness. When you realize this pure nothingness, you see how it has come out of everything which is in you. When this experience is gained, the faculty of wanting nothing is developed. and you begin to experience it. So he's talking about the own point. It's within each of us. And when we can stop desiring, we will recognize that we are everything. So thank you, everyone, for another wonderful inquiry circle. Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Thank you, Anne.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm grateful
Thank
to
you.
have this opportunity to share.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Great,
Thank you,
thanks.
Anne.
So we'll continue working on this. We're gonna spend time on this whole worksheet. So